Welcome to Puddlecast, where we discuss safety, water, environment, and career development topics. Let's jump in.
John Loyd.
Hello.
Hey.
Hi.
How are you?
Been good. How are you?
Good. Thanks for coming in, doing our little Puddlecast here.
Sure.
Hey, I just wanted to talk to you. How long have you been doing source control inspections for cities?
Since 2011.
Okay, so that's been a while.
You
got several cities under your belt, and you're seeing lots of different places. Tell me about like the source control program itself. When a city's adopting one of these programs, what are some of the things that they got to consider in terms of putting a program together and what it takes for you to go out and successfully accomplish that?
Public education is the first part of that. It's rare for a business to understand why somebody's coming to their door.
Sure.
And
what do you mean? Everybody doesn't know the stormwater's one word?
Yeah, that's the problem. Nobody knows what the Clean Water Act is. They've heard about it. They like the idea of fishable, swimmable waters, but don't know that it's all dependent upon day-to-day decisions that nobody thought had any ramifications at all.
Sure.
Public education is probably the biggest issue.
Okay.
You've got to go in and explain. Well, I think it sort of depends on what you want the outcome to be. If you want to walk in and from a top-down perspective and say, you don't need to understand why, you just need to do this. Certainly, you can build a program like that. If you want to build relationships between your municipality and the businesses that are whose tax base is feeding the municipality, which I think is the right course to go with, you really do need to sort of take it a step back and explain that everybody creates pollution. I brought pollution on this site when I drove here and left copper and zinc all over your parking lot. You're welcome.
Yeah.
Most of the businesses I work with are not industrial clients. They don't have an industrial permit, so that isn't necessarily something that is a trigger point for them with the businesses that I work with, but certainly could be if that's the kind of business that you're working with.
Sure.
Explaining that leaving a dumpster open, letting rain collect in it, and the leachate get out is a problem.
Yeah.
Even if it's passive and you didn't think it was your fault.
Yeah, and I can only imagine like the diversity of the businesses that you're visiting and what do you do when somebody doesn't understand the words that are coming out of your mouth because you're speaking English and they're looking at you sideways, right? I mean, how do you do that?
You got to employ some empathy.
Yeah. Sure.
One of the common hiccups that I find is I'll say, "Hey, I'm here. I see there's suds coming from that car right there. It's sparkling clean car, and there's suds coming from there to the catch basin. This is an issue." The first response is, "It's not illegal to wash cars. Why are you in here? Let's get combative about this." And say, "Absolutely. I'm not concerned about you washing the car. I'm concerned about the waste that's coming off of that." Now, giving them some room and some understanding to know that I didn't actually expect you to know what the rules and regulations are on every single operation. I think that's the right starting point. Not everybody shares that, but certainly the cities that I work with have appreciated that from the outset. And I'm finding more and more cities that I've talked to that I'm not working with, but I work alongside and interact with. I'm seeing a lot more of them understand that the baseline level of understanding from the layperson, the civilian, is a lot different than those of us that have been in the stormwater world for a decade.
Well, sure. We use our own language, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so, to support that, how important is it that you have translatable material or material that speaks to their understanding? You're trying to grow their understanding, but you're growing their understanding in a language that's maybe not their first language.
Sure.
And so how do you get that communicated across?
Well, there's two sequential components. First off, the baseline language needs to be dumbed down, and I hate to use that term. Yeah, there was the first term that came to mind.
Right?
Baseline. There it is. It needs to be particularly accessible to all. If you can explain this to an 8th grader, you can probably explain it to a person that's working both front of house, back of house, and management at a business site. So understanding that explaining the problem that I'm here to deal with needs to be it needs to be understandable by all. And once we get to that point, now we need to talk about whether or not everybody here at this facility speaks the same language.
Okay.
Right? So not, and I mean literally, conversational in English isn't the same as technically proficient in English.
Sure. Okay.
Literate in their own language isn't something that you should expect either. So when you leave behind all those translated materials, probably want to lean heavier on pictures than on a translated language, and that's true for English as well.
Yeah. Okay.
So really bringing the baseline level down to a human-to-human level.
Yeah.
So that they understand that fishable, swimmable water is right, and it's a right that could be taken away by the activities of all the neighbors if nobody takes seriously pollution prevention.
Yeah. And we've talked about this multiple times, but we've always talked about the approach and walking into a business and you're all of a sudden this stranger that's talking to them about something that they don't understand. It's always a little bit more palatable or easier when you're walking in with a gift.
Absolutely.
Now, they don't understand what this gift does or what it is, but oftentimes our spill kit programs, when we're walking in there and we're saying, hey, here's a tool. This tool is used for this purpose. You may need this at some point. I'm not saying that you are one of these people that's going to do it, but saying that this is an entry point to be able to walk into that.
Yeah, I liken them to first aid kits.
Sure. Okay.
I don't want you to skin your knee,
Right.
but if you skin your knee, I'd like you to have something around to patch that wound up.
Yeah.
Similarly, I don't want you to have a spill. I don't know that you're going to ever have a spill.
Right.
But if you did, I'd like you to be able to clean the pollutant up before it affects the creek right here,
Yeah.
or the beach where kids play and animals live.
Sure.
I think it's also important with the spill kit programs, with those behavior change programs that give incentives out that require a business owner or an employee to do extra work. I think it's important to bear that in mind. You're asking them to be willing to do more work in the future. So coming at it not only from a place of generosity in that you're equipping them with the tools that they need to address a problem in the future, something in the abstract, but also be willing to thank them for being willing to do the work.
Yeah. Participate.
Yeah. It isn't a passive effort. It's going to require that you care.
Right.
And if you can explain that to folks as you work with them and inspire them to care a little bit,
Sure.
that will go a lot further than saying, this is a kit, you need to clean spills, goodbye.
Yeah.
Taking extra time is an important piece of those behavior change programs and those public education programs, because it's you're taking time out of their day to care about the conversation.
Sure.
That's step one. Now you're taking time out of their life to care about dealing with an abstract problem that has not happened yet.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Some humility.
That's fair.
Some humility.
Yeah.
Some patience, and some, not wiggle room, but doing anything is better than doing nothing.
Right.
And getting them to a place where they're willing to accept that and take that responsibility on. It's a social dance. You really need to, I don't want to say you have to flirt with them, but I think it's important for you to be willing to get on their good side, ingratiate yourself to them, inspire them to want to be part of a team rather than just say, well,
Flashing your stormwater badge.
yeah. Yeah, top-down pressure doesn't always work.
So with all these cities, they're experiencing new pressure. They're experiencing a new program that they're having to implement, and visiting all these businesses and categorizing all these businesses and finding what businesses are the ones that influence the MS4 system the most or whatever. What have been the challenges that have been expressed to you about them and their record keeping or their program development or whatever with these source control programs?
Certainly the volume of information that comes in is the number one challenge, because so depending upon the city, depending upon the state, the municipal permits are written differently across the country.
Sure.
So the thresholds that cities need to meet in order to stay in compliance,
Yeah.
can be overwhelming when these programs are new and are launching.
You bet.
So when 20% of your overall business inventory needs to be reached on an annual basis, depending upon the city,
The size of staff.
yeah,
All the rest of that.
right.
That's
So
a huge
the city's resources in order to accommodate for that much public interaction
Yeah.
is a challenge. And the resources that city has is going to be that the city has to work with in order to meet those thresholds is a challenge.
There's probably a lot of cross training that has to go on because you have different people that are visiting those businesses for different purposes.
Correct.
And if you can cross train those people that are going out there for a fire inspection or for solid waste inspection to help serve some of the need of that stormwater source control program or vice versa.
Absolutely. And the openness to the openness on the part of the business community to having these conversations sometimes means that you need to leverage other programs as entry points for this newer program that the business has never had to interact with before.
Yeah.
You know, you mentioned fire. I've done joint visits with fire departments in certain cities because it makes sense to the business to see somebody from the fire department come in and say, I need to do an inspection.
Sure.
We want to look at your hazardous materials that you have on site, make sure they're labeled, everything's tight-fitting lids and secondary containments in place. Here's John. He also needs to talk about these things, but from a different perspective.
Yeah, okay.
Right? Whereas if I walked in a city that has never had a source control program before, and I said, hi, my name is John, and I want to talk about your hazardous waste, there's a defensiveness with some cities and their business communities that it's going to be a hurdle for me to overcome.
Sure.
So in the early phases of a source control program's launch, it's important to have, let's say have a conversation with your colleagues in other departments to understand what's the business community's overall understanding of the inspection process.
Sure.
Not about source control.
Right.
Overall.
Seeing yellow
There's public
lights show up
health.
on their
Yeah.
property.
How does my business community respond to public health coming in, to the fire department coming in?
Like, do I need a concealed weapons permit for this, or am I going to be?
Are there folks that we really need to take a little bit more time and consideration? Do we want to put letters out first?
Yeah.
Do we want to make phone
fair.
calls out
Yeah.
first? Do we want to just go and introduce ourselves, explain to them that we're not coming in to ticket you, we're coming in to talk about the city's permit and
Right.
what that means for you since you're operating under the city's permit?
Yeah.
I think that it's important to leverage relationships that already exist.
Yeah.
You know, this country's old enough that there's been enough interactions between municipalities and businesses that somebody in your city knows the business community.
Yeah.
So tap into that resource.
Yeah.
That's important information that you can learn from. You can inform your program with.
Yeah. Well, what do you think about all these mobile businesses that are crossing between these jurisdictional boundaries? Who gets credit for talking to the food truck, or gets credit for the upholstery or landscaper or whatever?
I think that given the fact that a business that is permitted and resides in city A, but is operating in city B, makes it such that city B is going to have to be able to take control of what's happening within their city limits.
Sure, because the input is into their system. Right?
Correct. Understanding that the leverage points that you have are going to be different with a business that does not reside in your city but is operating within your city. Understanding how to explain, there's another level of education right there. That businesses need to know that just because you're operating in a city but housed in another does not make you immune to the regulations in the cities that you're operating within.
Okay.
That is something that I have heard a fair amount in the past. Hey, I'll talk to the city of name specific cities out. I'll talk to my city's agency, but not yours. Can be another hurdle that you're going to have to be willing to overcome.
Or worse, like this was totally fine in the last city I was in.
Absolutely.
Why is this a problem here? I don't understand. I do this work all over the place, and this is not a problem.
It's the first time I've ever heard of this. Yeah. Well, I understand that. This is right now at this point in certainly in our state, the source control requirement is relatively new. So I'm queued up and ready to have that conversation. Yeah. And say, this is relatively new. You're going to have this conversation with the city in which you operate, the city in which you reside as it is. You're meeting up with me first. We're going right back to public education and explaining what the state's NPDES permit system calls out for in cities of all sizes. And explain to them that though you haven't heard of this before doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. Though that you haven't heard of it before doesn't mean that it does not apply to you. So we'll go back to what did I talk? I think I referred to it as empathy, maybe understanding that we can all get on the same page if we're willing to take some time and expend some effort, bringing people to the same level of understanding. And it takes time, it takes effort. Mobile businesses is a challenging market. Not that mobile businesses are inherently bad players.
Yeah, for sure, exactly.
Sometimes it's just the nature of the work, though. Landscapers in particular don't see any problem with blowing grass out into the street. Depending upon your city, you need to explain, well, in this particular city, this has already been earmarked as a pollutant that we need to be more concerned about than maybe in the neighboring city. Topography can play a role in that, and explaining that solids going into a catch basin leads to flooding. This particular city sits lower than the neighboring city. We have more flooding here, right? So explaining components of the rationale, all the components that went into the rationale behind why something is maybe a higher priority in one city versus another.
Or why practice needs to change in this jurisdiction over another jurisdiction has other influences besides just pollutant control.
But even then, solids shouldn't be going into the catch basins uphill either. Right? The city uphill has the same regulations. They have the luxury of being able to prioritize other things.
Okay. Well, I mean, this is a growing thing. It's going to keep expanding. Source control is going to keep growing as jurisdictions have more and more conversations. We're seeing the shifts of even moving commercial spaces into NPDES permits. So this education is going to grow across the country as we go. But really, thank you for coming out and having a chat and talking about it. We know it's always a fluid situation. That's what we're talking about here with our little puddle gear puddlecast.
Yeah, your pun's intended, I assume. That's wonderful. I haven't heard that before. I like it.
Well, John, thanks for being here. When people if they had questions for you, or they want to talk about a source control program, how do they get a hold of you?
Sure. You can find me and my coworkers at BEAEnvironmental.com. And you're welcome to email me at johnloyd@beaenvironmental.com. That's JOHNLOYD.
Awesome. Not 2 L's, which I did for a long time.
Yeah, too cheap for that extra one.
That's it. Well, thanks for being part of Puddlecast. You can find us on Puddlecast on our website, and keep checking in because we're going to have more conversations about stormwater-related things because we know it's a fluid situation.
Thanks for having me, Nate.
Thank you to today's special guest. Join us again on the next Puddlecast.